The Romang sun never sets on a simple truth. History belongs to the victors. And in the grand marble halls of Rome, they told a story so perfect it became gospel for centuries. This is the story of Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus Pompey the Great, the golden son of Rome who, in 3 brilliant months, swept the Mediterranean clean of the pirate scourge. The official records sing of his flawless campaign, his tactical genius, his restoration of order to a panicked republic. They speak of a heroic victory, a testament to Roman might and virtue. The Senate granted him a triumph, the people hailed him as a savior, and the history books, written by his admirers, embalmed the legend. But what if the foundation of that legend is rotten? What if the glorious 3-month campaign was not a brilliant war, but a desperate cleanup operation? What if the greatest threat to Rome wasn't a faceless horde of brigands, but a sophisticated political rival, a sovereign queen, whose name Rome systematically expunged from existence? The crack in Pompey's marble facade isn't just a flaw in the stone. It's a fracture in the narrative itself. To understand the depth of the lie, we must first understand the scale of the crisis. In the 1st century BC, Rome was no longer just a city of 7 hills. It was the pulsing heart of an economic superorganism. Its lifeblood flowed across the Mediterranean in the holds of grain ships from Egypt, carrying the harvest that kept the volatile Roman mob from riot. It pulsed in the spices from Arabia, the silk from the distant East, and the silver from the mines of Spain. This was a delicate, globalized system, and by the late 70s BC, it was shutting down. Ports from Ostia to Brundisium lay quiet. The price of bread in the Subura district soared, and a low, constant hum of anxiety vibrated through the forum. The Republic was being strangled, not by a foreign army at its gates, but by an invisible hand closing around its throat. The Roman senators, in their togas of purple trim, initially dismissed the reports as the exaggerations of hysterical merchants. Pirates were a nuisance, a cost of doing business in the lawless eastern seas. But the reports grew more alarming, then terrifying. This was no longer about stolen cargo. Coastal cities in Sicily, Greece, and even Italy itself were being sacked in broad daylight. Luxurious villas, symbols of Roman peace and prosperity, were going up in smoke. And most shockingly, the targets were becoming personal. Senators received ransom notes for their daughters, kidnapped from their summer estates. Military tribunes, the future commanders of Rome's legions, were paraded in chains before being auctioned back to their families. The enemy wasn't just stealing wealth. It was stealing dignity, the very illusion of Roman invincibility. And they were doing it with a mocking, terrifying efficiency. Out of this chaos emerged not just a leader, but a sovereign. Rome's greatest nightmare had a face, and history suggests it was a woman's. Her name is the first and most significant casualty of this war, erased, redacted, replaced with vague, gender-neutral terms like pirate chief or Cilician leader. But the scale of her achievements screams against anonymity. While Rome perceived only chaos, she engineered a masterstroke of statecraft. In the jagged, defensible coves of Cilicia, on the southern coast of Anatolia, she didn't establish a hideout. She built a capital. Imagine a city unlike any other in the ancient world, a floating republic of the dispossessed. Her port was a marvel of anti-Roman engineering, not a grand, open harbor, but a labyrinth of hidden inlets and fortified channels. Here, shipyards operated day and night, producing not the hulking, slow triremes of Rome, but the limby, sleek, fast, shallow-draft vessels that could outrun anything in the Roman fleet and disappear into countless creeks. Warehouses bulged not just with plunder, but with trade goods acquired through a shadow economy that bypassed Roman taxes. She had a centralized treasury, a code of laws, and a network of informants that stretched into the very heart of the Roman provinces. This wasn't a bandit camp. It was a fully functional, defiantly independent nation-state, a black market mirror of the Roman Republic itself. Thriving on its failure, her military strategy was a work of cruel genius, a scalpel that expertly found Rome's jugular. She understood that Rome's power was as psychological as it was physical. So she weaponized humiliation. Her orders were clear: target the human symbols of Roman prestige. A Roman nobleman's value wasn't in his ship's cargo, but in his person. Captured patricians were treated with a chilling theatrical courtesy. They were housed decently, fed well, and then presented with exorbitant, meticulously calculated ransom demands. The process was a performance designed to broadcast a single devastating message. Asterisk, you are not a ruler of the world. You are a commodity. Your empire, your imperium, ends where the water meets the sand. Asterisk, the psychological warfare was underpinned by devastating economic strategy. She didn't just intercept the grain fleet. She controlled it. Some ships were captured, their crews recruited or ransomed. Others were allowed to pass for a fee, a private tax that fed her treasury and starved Rome's. The flow of silver from Spain was diverted. The luxurious trade from the east was rerouted through her ports. She wasn't just robbing Rome. She was becoming Rome's unauthorized and far more efficient customs agent. By the peak of her power, her influence didn't just lap at the edges of the empire. It washed up on the beaches of Italy itself. Wealthy Romans in Puteoli or Neapolis would glance nervously at the horizon, wondering if the dark speck there was a trading vessel or a herald of their own bankruptcy. The crisis was now domestic. The pirate queen hadn't just challenged Rome's authority. She had made a mockery of its Pax Romana in its own backyard dot in Rome. The political atmosphere curdled from concern into panic, and then into something far worse: paralyzing humiliation. The Senate, that body of esteemed former consuls and generals, became a theater of recrimination and blame. Traditional naval commanders, sent east with great fanfare, returned in disgrace, their fleets outmaneuvered, and their reputations in tatters. Each failed expedition was more than a military loss. It was a propaganda victory for the Queen, proof that the mighty Roman war machine could be made a fool of. Worse still was the financial hemorrhage. Every ransom paid by a desperate senatorial family didn't just empty a private coffers. It directly funded the enlargement of the pirate fleet, the strengthening of their fortifications, the payment of their spies. Rome was quite literally bankrolling its own nemesis. The state treasury, strained by foreign wars and domestic graft, was being bled dry by this shadow conflict. The pirate queen had created a perfect, self-sustaining loop. Roman gold financed the attacks that created the need for more Roman gold. It was strategic parasitism of the highest order. This context transforms Pompey's famous appointment from a reward for brilliance into a desperate gamble born of collective failure. The young Gnaeus Pompeius was not a traditional aristocrat. He was a novus homo in spirit, a political outsider who built his reputation on flashy, populist military successes. He understood the power of spectacle. When the tribune Aulus Gabinius proposed the Lex Gabinia, it wasn't just a military bill. It was a surrender of the Republic's core principles in the face of existential terror. The law granted Pompey authority never before concentrated in one man. Imperium over the entire Mediterranean and all its coastlines for 50 miles inland. The power to raise a staggering fleet of 500 ships. An army of 120,000 men, and access to almost the entire treasury. His opponents, like the young Julius Caesar, who saw the danger, railed against it. The senator Quintus Lutatius Catulus famously asked if, having failed to find a general to defeat the pirates, they would now appoint a king to rule them. But the panic won. The bill passed. Why? The unspoken truth was that the crisis had revealed a fatal weakness in the Roman system. The pirate queen had exposed the Republic's bureaucracy, its divided command, in its arrogant complacency. She proved that a flexible, centralized, ideologically driven enemy could run rings around a rigid, politically fractured superpower. Pompey's command wasn't about defeating pirates. It was about creating a Roman mirror of the pirate queen's own efficiency, a single, unstoppable executive power to counter a single brilliant executive mind. The question haunting the Senate wasn't just, can Pompey win? But can we afford to admit that our system has already lost? Pompey's campaign was a masterclass in logistics and psychological warfare tactics he may well have learned by studying his enemy. He didn't just chase fleets. He divided the Mediterranean into 13 districts, each with its own commander and squadron, systematically choking off all movement. But his most potent weapon was the carrot alongside the stick. He broadcast promises of clemency, land, and Roman citizenship to any pirate who surrendered. This wasn't just a military tactic. It was a political one. It attacked the very cohesion of the pirate state, offering her captains and soldiers a peaceful future within the system they were fighting. The great, climactic naval battle the Roman historians likely long to describe was probably a subdued affair. By the time Pompey's overwhelming force cornered the main pirate fleet off the coast of Cilicia, the heart may have already gone out of their resistance. Many had already taken his deal. What remained was less a defiant nation and more a cornered remnant. The final actions were likely less a heroic last stand and more a brutal mop-up operation, the silencing of the hardliners, the true believers, and the queen's inner circle who could never be pardoned. Pompey returned to Rome not just as a conqueror, but as the author of a new truth. His triumph was the most lavish scene to that date, a spectacle designed to overwrite the recent past. But look at the statues and the coins from that period. Look at the accounts. Pompey's face in his triumph is often described as stern, unsmiling. This was the expression of a man consolidating a narrative, not celebrating a pure victory. He had ended the crisis, but he had also ended a rival government. The distinction was crucial for his legend. Then began the second, more permanent campaign, the War on Memory. The vibrant, rebellious pirate ports of Cilicia were not just occupied. They were sanitized. Cities were refounded with bland Roman names. Adana, Megarsus, and others were repopulated with loyal veterans. The unique culture of the pirate state, its laws, its records, its songs, its very identity, was fed to the flames. And at the center of this historical bonfire was its leader. Her name vanishes. Her specific deeds are blurred into the general outrages of the pirates. Any record of her treaties, her decrees, her speeches, all gone. In their place, Roman historians like Plutarch and Cicero speak only of the pirates, a faceless, monstrous horde. This was not an accident of time. This was a deliberate policy of damnatio memoria, a condemnation of memory usually reserved for traitorous emperors. Why? Because a named queen is a political entity. A named queen can negotiate, can claim sovereignty, can inspire future rebels. A nameless pirate chief is a criminal to be exterminated. Rome couldn't defeat her idea, so it resolved to uncreate her. So we circle back to our initial crack in the marble. Did Pompey save Rome from pirates? Technically, yes. He restored trade and ended the kidnappings. But did he save Rome from the deeper, more uncomfortable truth? Absolutely. The truth that a non-Roman, a woman, could outthink, outorganize, and humiliate the Republic for nearly a decade. The truth that the mighty Pax Romana was a fragile illusion that could be shattered by a more agile, more motivated intelligence. Pompey's victory buried that terrifying revelation beneath the monolithic, unchallengeable legend of Roman destiny. We are left, then, with a ghost, a presence defined by her absence. We see her in the gaps in the record, in the disproportionate scale of Rome's response, in the sheer, sustained terror of the Roman elite. We hear her in the silence where her name should be. She is the shadow sovereign, the queen of a lost history. What was her real name? Was she a disaffected noble from a conquered kingdom? A brilliant naval commander who saw Rome's weakness? A charismatic leader who offered a different dream to the oppressed of the Mediterranean? We will likely never know. The sea keeps its secrets well, but the lesson remains, echoing far beyond the ancient world. History is not just written by the victors. It is edited by the terrified. The most powerful triumphs are not just those won on the battlefield, but those won in the archive and the public square, where inconvenient people are reduced to footnotes and terrifying ideas are smoothed into acceptable myths. The pirate queen challenged an empire, and for a glorious moment, won. For that crime, Rome took everything from her kingdom, her people, and finally, her very name. Yet, in the very ferocity of that erasure, they immortalized her. They proved that her idea was, indeed, too powerful to remember. And so, in the end, impossible to forget. The sea never forgets a queen, and neither should we.